Hey, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
We are finally back for another Readathon.
It's the Readathon, bitches.
Sorry we've been away, but we literally were away. And then a bunch of stuff happened this week, and I wanted to capture it all in one episode.
Okay, let's talk about it.
All right. So one legal development for Karen Read and her team is that she had, as you may remember, filed for a stay in the civil case that was filed against her and McCarthy's and the Waterfall Bars by Paul O'Keefe and the O'Keefe family.
Right, okay.
So the stay would mean that she would want to delay the proceedings in the civil case until after the next trial in order to maintain her Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. Do you want to explain that a little?
Yeah, I mean, it's a criminal defendant, as you know, has the right to remain silent, not testify in a criminal proceeding, but they don't have the same right in a civil proceeding. So there is always the fear that upon being deposed, a defendant will say something that may incriminate themselves. So it would be a way to get around, that Fifth Amendment protection. It's also sort of another bite at the apple as far as getting somebody to say what their story is and then contradict it. You know, the more times that they get deposed or questioned or interviewed about their actions or what happened, blah, 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 then the more chances they have to make a mistake or contradict themselves, which can be used to impeach them at a criminal trial.
Right.
So there are criminal protections that are at odds with civil procedure.
So you actually can plead the Fifth in a civil deposition.
Okay.
But only if your testimony could be used to incriminate you of a crime. Okay?
Right. And in a civil case, a jury is allowed to make a negative inference of that.
If you plead the Fifth.
And certainly, yes. And
so if Karen Read were to plead the Fifth instead of staying this, that could be used against her in the civil case in a way that it can't be used against you in court. So
and then after the case, it's sort of, after a criminal case, then sort of the civil thing is a whole other matter. Yeah.
Before I get to what happened, can you explain the difference between, there's this very silly messaging online that Karen Read, and this was actually also in Paul O'Keefe's and the O'Keefe family's petition in fighting this stay, that she's been talking to the media and therefore she has no problem with talking, so she should be willing to speak in court.
Yeah, that's not how that works.
It's not how it works. It's stupid.
Right.
It's a stupid thought.
Yes, if she were to say something that she would later claim was covered by attorney-client privilege, then that could be pierced. But just talking to the press does not indicate someone's willingness to be deposed or to, testify at a criminal hearing. But the information that she provides certainly could be used against her in either proceedings.
Absolutely, except what information that she talks to a reporter about is likely harder to be provided or won't be provided. The notes, the raw tape of an interview, the stuff that happens off camera between being, interviewed, the reporter's work product is generally not discoverable or subpoenaable because that's a First Amendment protection for the press.
Right. And that's generally something that is argued by the media organization.
Right. As
opposed to a defendant or a respondent in a civil trial.
In fact, the new prosecutor in Karen Read's next trial has actually is trying to obtain raw tape from a television interview she did and raw notes.
That's what I would do. Yeah.
I would try, but just know that if you're listening to this, it is very, very hard to obtain this. The freedom of the press actually depends on reporters being able to have a work product that isn't published. So anyway, that's how sources are protected, et cetera. So anyway, so there was an outcome in this civil lawsuit motion for Karen Read. The outcome, I think, is actually very good for her defense. It's not the stay of the whole case, which I know they probably would have liked the most because the case would have less merit if she's found not guilty. But instead, the court has done a partial stay. The stay is only on Karen Read being deposed or testifying. Anyone else can be deposed, can provide discovery or be asked for discovery, except for Karen Read.
Right.
So why is this good for the defense potentially?
Well, because that means that all of the players that they have accused of being part of a conspiracy or cover-up can be deposed again in the civil trial. So everybody that was questioned at the criminal trial and likely to be questioned again at the criminal trial for either side really will be, again, it's another bite at the apple for them. Again, another opportunity for them to contradict themselves. Everybody except for Karen Read.
That's right.
Right. So that's why it's a win for her.
And materials are discoverable, such as phone records.
Right.
That stuff is discoverable. So there's this funny thing going online right now. Everyone's like, the McCabe's and the Alberts are all rushing to Verizon today to once again replace their phones, which I would not be surprised if they did. But keep in mind, they could also subpoena Michael Morrissey. They could also subpoena Adam Lally. They could subpoena and depose people who may potentially have participated in the withholding of evidence and the changing of evidence and whatever their theory is. Like, they could ask them tough questions about the prosecution during this civil trial. So it opens up, if she can afford it, which we'll talk about in a minute, it opens up a huge opportunity for discovery for the defense that they do not have in a criminal case. They only have what's available to them that they can afford to obtain themselves, and that the prosecution provides, which, as we know in this case, has been very difficult.
Right. Right. And it's my understanding that, that's not automatic, that parties can appeal to a judge to quash a subpoena.
Yes.
Especially if you're a public official.
Yes.
Like the district attorney or
a cop.
Or a cop. You can make arguments against that, and maybe a judge will quash the subpoena for certain people, but you certainly have an opportunity to go for it, right?
Right. Just so you know, one thing that is kind of up in the air right now, Rabia Chaudhry told me, and we talked about it on this show, that, as a lawyer, we talked about it on Ellen and Rabia's show, and that's where she told me this, that Karen Read would not be able to sue the state if she's acquitted.
Right. That's the win. Yeah.
However, there are questions about whether or not there are parties she could sue for civil rights violations. Okay. So Proctor, Morrissey, individual parties that she could sue if it's somehow provable that there was a conspiracy against her. She could potentially sue for civil rights violations. Right.
She can't necessarily sue somebody as for an alternate theory of the crime.
Correct.
But she certainly, if she felt like I could prove that her civil rights were somehow violated by the prosecution about the process, then yeah.
Or by the police.
Right. But it's not going to be for $20 million. Usually those things are capped when it comes to public officials. But again, a win is a win.
Right. Well, so we'll see.
It's so funny because we're talking about this, that how many different times the parties have been, the other parties, not Karen, but people like the McCabe's or the, presumably in this case, the detectives have been put on the record.
Many times.
Because including the federal grand jury. Right. So you have interviews, police interviews where statements are made.
Depositions.
They probably, some appeared before the state grand jury in order to get an arrest warrant. Then you also have the federal grand jury, and then you have a trial. And now you have another civil case where they would be deposed. So, like I said, there are many opportunities for someone to make a mistake.
And what's interesting about the civil case is that, let's use Jen McCabe as an example, shall we? For no particular reason.
Okay.
Other than the fact that she was the most obfuscating witness on the stand for the entire trial, first time around. She cannot obfuscate in a civil case the way she can obfuscate in a criminal case.
Explain how.
As a witness. She can't say things like, I don't recall, and have that be unchallenged. So in a deposition, she can be presented with materials and be basically not forced but pushed to give answers that she can get away with not giving on the stand. Yeah,
right. Because her attorney, if she's being represented by an attorney
which
at a civil, right, the attorney will be there, and the attorney can object, but that doesn't shut down the question.
Absolutely not.
Right. So they're on the record as objecting to that, which
can be used by the jury in making their decision.
Right, and the objection can also be used, again, to quash certain information that might come out if later it's adjudicated as such.
Let me just put it this way. A deposition of Jen McCabe will be long. It will be difficult for her. And it's going to be a banger piece of tape if we ever get our hands on it. Okay.
Yeah, because yes, exactly.
All right. So
those will be videotaped. Yes.
Another big thing happened.
Yeah.
Since we've last recorded. And that is a 2-part Vanity Fair story was published where Karen Read spent 3 full days with a reporter from Vanity Fair named Julie Miller. Julie Miller stayed at Read's house, and they describe in the article the sort of boundaries that her editor set up with her. She provided her own food and so forth because, there's conflicts there.
Right.
Living with and bedding with the source. There was also security there.
Have some of my Cocoa Puffs. What? No, sorry, that's can't.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
It could be considered payola.
Sure.
Or whatever. Anyway.
Not payola,
I
but
know.
yeah.
You know what
I know what you're saying.
So basically, this 2-part story came out, and I was very pleased with it because it included everything. Everything that I would want to be included in a single
If you were
story.
to write it yourself.
If I were to write it myself, like when I describe this to people, the story included things like the Kevin Albert drunk driving incident, Chris Alberts having killed somebody in a drunk driving incident years ago, and then having started a multi-day manhunt for him because he ran away.
Okay.
Chris Albert being represented by Bev Canoni's brother in that case was in the story. It included the butt dials. It included basically all of the stuff that impeaches, believability that she did it.
Right, because there have been long form pieces and done on the case, such as 2020. Dateline. Yes. Covered by Day with Dateline. And there was it the Bostonian?
Yes.
And was it New York Magazine or the New Yorker?
Boston Magazine.
Boston Magazine.
Yeah, and the New York Times did something. But
yeah, it's right. New York Times. So there are a lot of those different pieces. Some of them get added, but you have not found before this a single publication that brought together nearly all of the important pieces. Okay.
Yeah, it brought together, I'd say, all of the important pieces.
Yeah,
including, let's just talk about some stuff I learned in the story.
What'd you learn?
All right. So one of the things that I learned is that Karen Read will not plea out, period.
That's what she says.
She says she will not give them that win. She would rather serve time wrongfully than plea out to something she did not do, and she, quote, will not give them that win. Okay? I learned that. I learned that Karen Read was exceptionally close with John O'Keefe's niece and nephew that he had basically, taken in, and exceptionally close with them. It created a lot of conflict between them throughout their relationship because he was like the disciplinarian. He was like, I think less... We kind of read between the lines that he was kind of less good with kids than she was. Like, she was very good with the kids. They adored her. And he would complain that she was getting to, quote, be the fun one, while he had to be the heavy. But it also sounded like the kids genuinely adored her. And
this is from Karen's perspective. This is what she said.
But she's not the only person who said this. This has actually come out before. But the thing that I also learned was that she was very close to John O'Keefe's father. Less close with his mother, but very close with his father. Okay. Another thing I learned is that she talks about her flirtation and kisses with Brian Higgins. You know about that, right?
He's the ATF agent who happened to be at the party.
Yes.
And...
Let's talk about Higgins for a second.
Okay, sure, right.
So Brian Higgins was a friend of O'Keefe's. Brian Higgins was the link between John O'Keefe and the Alberts. He actually had never really socialized with the Alberts before. He'd met them.
The O'Keefes had not.
No, John O'Keefe had not.
Okay.
He had met up with the Alberts like once at a bar, but the connection between them was Brian Higgins, who is friends with John O'Keefe and friends with the Alberts. The other connection was, I think, Julie Albert, maybe. He was friends with maybe Chris's wife, I think, or something like that. So there was some loose connections, but he was not friendly with Brian Albert, and he was not like, they weren't tight before this night, which is why...
Right. They're law enforcement, but he's in the ATF, and the others in Boston Police, where it isn't like... They share a locker room or something. Right.
Brian Albert and John O'Keefe were both Boston cops, and they were not friends. And they had he had never been to the Alberts house before. So this would have been the first time he would have been there, which is important. That's actually part of Karen's story, is that
Brian O'Keefe had never been there, or that
John
Brian Higgins?
O'Keefe had never been to Brian Albert's house before.
Okay.
So that's part of Karen's story, is that when they were invited, she's like, not only have we not been there before, so we don't know how to get there,
right,
but... I know that some of these people don't like me, or may not like me, or may be weird about. So why don't you go in, see what it's like, and then I'll come and like wave to me, and I'll come in too. Just check the vibe. He never came out. She got really angry and left. Okay, so that's her story. So the fact that they weren't friends before actually is important. All right, so she had a couple of flirtations with Brian Higgins, one of which was caught on a Ring camera video outside of John O'Keefe's house, where she told him he was hot. She kissed him. They had some flirty texts, right? Mm-hmm. She basically talks about that in the story, which I think is great. She says, and I think this is a very realistic answer, she was feeling insecure and she made a mistake, but he made her feel validated. Like that flirtation made her feel validated. I don't think that's uncommon, okay? Mm-hmm. The other thing that I learned is that...
By the way, I didn't mean to interrupt, but does the story go into what John O'Keefe's reaction to that was?
He doesn't need to know about it.
He doesn't need to know about it?
No, he didn't know about it.
He didn't know about it.
So one of the theories of the case is that when at the Waterfall Bar, there's actually very clear video of, I believe, Higgins trying to call O'Keefe over in a very aggressive way. Mm-hmm. And Brian Albert, I believe, or Chris Albert, one of them stops him and says, knock it off. Mm-hmm. And so there is a theory of the case that when John and Karen were going there and there was going to be some thing where like the friends or Brian Higgins would tell John about this thing between him and Karen. Mm-hmm. And that, that potentially could have set off a conflict there, if everybody's drunk. Right. So that is one of the theories of the case. And that's, I think, why Karen was uncomfortable going to the house, although she doesn't say that.
Right. And there would be a theory of the case where John O'Keefe would walk into the party and already Brian Higgins would have beef with him.
Right.
Or not. But I mean, that would be a theory, a scenario where you could see something physical happening, because that would be the inciting incident.
Right. Speaking of beef. I found out that, according to Karen Reed, John O'Keefe did have beef with Colin Albert. They had mutual beef because Colin Albert would frequently throw beer bottles and cans on John O'Keefe's lawn.
Is there any indication why he was doing that?
I think he's just a loser.
Because he's a loser.
I'm
Wasn't
not
there something with a car accident on that street?
Yes, that's a different story. I believe we talked about that once on the show.
Yeah, but now I think we did. But why don't you bring us around to that?
There was a body found across the street from John O'Keefe's house a couple years ago.
Okay,
a body just found on the lawn. Yeah. All right, and it was a big incident in Canton because there was a car accident. The police were called out to the site of the car accident, and there was no one at the car. Mm-hmm. And this was right in front of John O'Keefe's house. Mm-hmm. Later...
The accident happened in front of O'Keefe's house. Okay.
Later, a neighbor was walking down the street and saw this body on the lawn across the street from John O'Keefe's house. So somehow, the Canton police either didn't look, missed the body that apparently was right there, or that body was moved to be by the car later.
Yeah. I mean, again, I remember was one of the different incidents that was brought up by people in Canton to say that our police department sucks. It was certainly the Sandra Birchmore case, and then this other drunk driving case. But again, you're like, I don't want to say he was drunk driving, but this fatal accident, residential accident.
Right. And the fatal accident, there's ties between that guy who died and Colin Albert. They either may have been or were friends. Uh-huh. So there's a theory that Colin was in the car also and may have also been in this accident. Maybe he and the kid went to his house. Maybe the kid died and he brought the body back. Or
this is a residential neighborhood.
It's a residential neighborhood.
It's very unusual for that kind of accident to happen.
Keep in mind that John O'Keefe and Colin Albert lived right across the street from each other.
Okay.
Chris and Julie Albert and their son Colin lived diagonally across the street from John O'Keefe.
Okay.
When I say that Colin Albert is a loser, that whatever, I'm not talking about what I think he potentially did in this case. I'm talking about him, his social media, his just presence online. He's a douchebag. And by the way, he and his father, and I don't know how many others in the family, have a tattoo on their left pectoral that looks like a cop badge and says Albert on it.
Okay.
Just a fun fact.
All right,
so
cool,
imagine being he was like 17. He was a teenager and got that tattoo. Okay.
Jesus,
so this is like hardcore identity politics of his family.
Right. One last question before we get back to the main thread here. What does Colin do for a living?
I think he's still a student.
Still a student.
Or he's still young enough to be a student, whether or not he's actually
a student. How old is he?
He was, when he testified at trial, he was a rising junior. at college.
A rising junior. Okay.
Yeah, which means he was about to go into his junior year. But when this happened, he was still in high school.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
So anyway, so apparently they had beef, and John O'Keefe did not like Colin Albert. All right.
Right. So we have Colin Albert and Brian Higgins at this party that John O'Keefe, who is also inebriated, is allegedly going to walk into. Okay.
All right. So another thing that I learned, and I had heard this, something like this before, but Karen Reed tells the story from her perspective. After she left, so she was admitted to the hospital or treated in the hospital when John O'Keefe was there because she was having suicidal ideations to her dad. She was saying like she can't live without him. And so they had her put on a psychiatric hold. But then when she was let out, she went to the O'Keefe's house, John's parents' house. And they were talking about his death. And Paul O'Keefe, John's father, said, in terms of the way he looked in the hospital, quote, he looked like he went 5 rounds with Mike Tyson.
Right.
Paul O'Keefe said that. And then the mother said, I think he looks like he got hit by a car. And was very cold to Karen. And I think that's when Karen realized something was off. She went home. She called her dad. She said, I don't know what's going on, but I think the O'Keefes think I did something.
Right. So, and this is something she said to ABC, as I recall.
She said it to Vanity Fair. Okay. But I had forgotten that he looks like he went 5 rounds with Mike Tyson part, which is interesting. Okay. Here's a big one. So this is about the tip that David Yannetti, Karen O'Keefe's lawyer, got right after her arraignment. Okay. So Yannetti received this call on February 2nd, which was hours after Karen Reed's arraignment, her first arraignment, okay? A man with an especially gravelly voice, I'm quoting from the article here, claiming to have a background in Boston law enforcement, made an explosive claim. He told Yannetti that Brian Albert and his nephew had beaten up O'Keefe on January 29th. When O'Keefe didn't come to, said this man, Albert and an unnamed, quote, federal agent put O'Keefe's body on the front lawn. When Yannetti called him back for a more thorough interview, he backtracked, saying he was only speculating based on photos of O'Keefe in the news, and ultimately recanted the tip altogether. Okay, so you know about this.
Photos of him in the news?
That is what is important here. Yannetti is able to prove a timeline where there had never been any photos of O'Keefe released on February 2nd.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're not like great photos, right? They're certainly not flattering as far as like to be respectful of a dead man,
they're
right?
Gruesome photos.
Yeah, they're gruesome. Like, can you imagine any other case, particularly, I mean, a murder case or a fatal accident case where you saw photos of the guy's face in the hospital?
Right.
That were published?
Right.
Well, I mean, it was actually kind of like a good thing that they published it because now we've all seen, like, yeah, his face, both of his eyes, yeah, it does look like he was
beaten up.
It does look
and
like
he also
beaten
had dog bites a little bit.
And the dog bites, of course.
But anyway, Yannetti was able to show and is able to prove, and he tells Vanity Fair that no photos have been published or released at the time of that first call. And other details from his tip, of course, lined up. Federal agent would be Higgins. He had been drinking at the Albert home that morning, and Albert's nephew Colin had been there. And until that phone call, until that tip's call, Yannetti didn't know and Reed didn't know that Colin was in the house at all. The tipster is the one who placed Colin at the house. So him being at the house was not in any police reports. When the police interviewed everybody, they got a list of who was at the house. Colin was not on that list.
Okay.
Why would Colin not be on that list?
Because everybody said that he wasn't there.
Right. Why would everyone say he wasn't there?
Well, if
nothing happened, there's no fucking reason to say he wasn't there.
Right.
Okay? All right. So that's
either because he really wasn't there,
no,
or
he was
because
there.
Okay,
he admits to being there. He just says he left earlier than he actually probably did.
Everybody was down, but no, he was never here at all.
No one mentioned his name.
Yeah, okay.
When they were given a list of people who were there, the police never put his name in any police reports. He was not documented as having been there until this tip came in.
Okay.
Isn't that fucking interesting?
Interesting, yes.
Okay. Another thing I learned is that Karen is in possession in a controlled storage unit of all the carpet that was removed from 34 Fairview after the Alberts moved out.
How is that even possible?
I can tell you exactly how it happened. Turtle Boy, Aiden Carney, I think, was commonly driving by 34 Fairview at this time, taking photos, just doing commentary for his YouTube, etc. Okay. He drove by one day and saw a flooring van after the new homeowners had moved in. Outside the house in the driveway, and he told Karen Reed. He either texted her, I think he texted her or called her, or I think he texted her and said, hey, to send her a picture. This van is outside the house right now. I wonder what they're doing. Karen Reed had hired a private investigator The private investigator went to the company that was there.
Yeah.
They said they had removed carpet from like the entirety or some of the 34 Fairview house. Not the basement, by the way. The basement flooring had been replaced before they moved in.
Right.
Which was also in the story, by the way.
Right.
And in the story, the claim is that the realtor told them to replace the flooring because of, quote, water damage. Anyway, so she has all the other carpet from the Alberts house. The problem is she doesn't know which rooms particular pieces of carpet came from. She wouldn't know where to start looking. And each DNA swab that she could potentially do on this carpet to prove John O'Keefe was in the house would cost $5,000.
Yeah.
So she could potentially do hundreds of thousands of dollars of DNA swabs.
Oh, even millions.
Millions, okay?
Millions.
So she has the carpet.
Because there'd be so many DNA samples, including from the contractors ripping them up.
Right. And you know how Kevin, the anti-Karen Reed sock puppets, go fucking bananas anytime there's media or any kind of positive development in Karen Reed's case?
Yeah.
They have really been on this carpet thing.
Mm-hmm.
And their message is, there was no carpet in the basement. Ha, ha, ha. And
sounds like they've been there.
But guess what? No one is claiming this carpet came from the basement.
Right, right.
They are the ones talking about the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever someone like says, they tell on themselves, right?
Right,
they
right.
tell. It's like,
Right.
why is
well,
it?
everybody knows that's what the theory of the crime
Right.
is, right?
That being said, like they always go back to the thing that like you shouldn't be talking about. Like just make no big say that. Oh, fuck it. Just don't talk about the carpet. But they made a very big deal of the carpet, which is always interesting to me to see with the sock puppets. By the way, many of them are McCabe's, Alberts, and their friends. It's always interesting to me to see what they have to say and what they respond to. So another thing that came out of the article, there's more detail about Chloe the dog's previous behavior. Chloe the dog, who, as you know, was, quote, rehomed a few months after the John O'Keefe death.
Yeah. And had a history of biting other animals.
Right. Chloe the dog attacked another dog that was walking by her house with a neighbor with the intent to kill that dog, the vet later said. The vet looking at the attacked dog's wound said that dog meant to kill your dog. It had wounds on its neck. It had wounds everywhere. And the neighbor could not get Chloe to stop attacking the dog. She couldn't pull her off until Brian Albert came out and called her back. Okay?
Just called her back.
Yes. What does that tell you?
Chloe is very compliant with her master.
Correct. So apparently this woman was really upset. They wanted to call animal control, and animal control is connected to the Canton Police Department. They called the police department for animal control. They said there's no one from animal control here. Okay. Shortly after, Kevin Albert, Brian's brother, who was a Canton cop, called the woman's husband and said, "Can't we just make this go away?"
Jesus.
All right. So this was obviously before John O'Keefe's
Someone
death.
fucks with my dog. The answer is no.
Right. And then the dog attacked another dog after John O'Keefe's death, and allegedly, and that's when they, quote, rehomed the dog to somebody in Vermont. All right. So that was very interesting to me.
I wonder what the behavior of that dog is today.
If the dog's
some
alive.
dogs are,
If
well,
the dog's
some
alive.
dogs are aggressive. Some dogs are made aggressive, right?
Yes, and
What's
some
going on
dogs
around?
get put down after they attack multiple dogs.
This is true. This is true.
Okay. So another thing that was interesting in the article, the Vanity Fair reporter hired an independent expert or asked an independent expert, a professor from Purdue, somebody who's an expert in telecommunications, records, and technology. That person looked at the reports from both the prosecution and defense. They looked at the celebrate extraction reports. And this expert says that How's Long to Die in the Snow search made by Jen McCabe, he believes was made at 227. That's obviously very much in dispute. This is a third expert because the FBI expert also says 227. The defense's expert said 227. And by the way, the sock puppets will say online, the defense expert later said he was wrong and apologized to Jen McCabe. That is not fucking true. That is a made up story. Okay? That's just a wholesale lie. But that's something they'll say on social media to get people to think it. The defense expert did say something in court, like he was challenged on something, and he said, yeah, no, you're right about that. Like he conceded one thing, but he maintains that search was made at 227. So did the FBI's expert. So does this guy from Purdue.
I just really I think the way to settle this really is to determine at what point did Google respond to that search?
They tried to get that.
Yeah, unfortunately, because if they responded at 2:30, it's settled.
They did try to get that, and for some reason were not able to. The prosecution could get that probably.
Sure.
All right. So they had another attorney weigh in this article named Doug Lewison, a Boston defense attorney who's represented law enforcement for 4 decades and is not working on the Reed case. He commented on Proctor and Proctor's behavior in the hours after the case, in particular when he was interviewing the McCabe's and Alberts together, when it, clearly became known he had a relationship with them, which later, by the way, he lied about. He said he didn't know any Alberts, and he knew all of them. This lawyer says, quote, "Forget about the allegations of the victim being killed inside the house. Quote, as soon as these people who Proctor was acquainted with were identified as witnesses, he should have dropped out of the case. It was a system of failure by state police."
Yeah.
So that was that. That was interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of
we do know that
interviews-
that investigative unit at the district attorney's office made of the state police has 20 people.
and we know that a bunch of
So
them.
it isn't just these 3 people we keep hearing about.
Yes. And a bunch of them are under investigation or have been removed from their jobs.
Yeah, sure, for
or are not being called as
various
witnesses
reasons
in the next trial.
Yeah.
So before, this is interesting, in terms of the interviews done that morning, the police came to the Albert home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of knocking on the door so that they could talk to the Alberts, they sent Jen McCabe inside the house to, quote, wake them up. Jen McCabe had an opportunity alone with the Alberts before the police arrived. Something to know, okay? They then interviewed McCabe and the Alberts together for 10 minutes without recording the conversation or searching the house. Canton Police Lieutenant Paul Gallagher testified they only interviewed McCabe and did not separate her from the Alberts when doing so. The officer said they had no reason to believe O'Keefe had ever been inside. And you know why they didn't have any reason to believe that?
Why?
Because everyone told them he hadn't been inside. Okay. At the neighborhood, there's a neighbor at the, quote, Asian house. Remember the Asian house?
No, the
All right.
Asian house?
Yes,
All
okay.
right.
So in the text thread between the Alberts, I believe it's Chris Albert or somebody who texts Brian Albert to say, the police are in your, there are people, cops are sort of driving down the street or in your yard, they're investigating, they're talking to the Asian neighbor right now, or they're talking to the Asian house right now.
Okay.
He could refer to it as the Asian house because Asian people lived there.
Yeah, if this were a house designed in the style of Asian architecture, I'd be cool with that term.
Imagine if the neighbors were black. Do you think he would have said it the African-American house in his text thread?
No.
I doubt it.
If he said the black house,
I doubt he
be
would
like,
have said
there's
the
no
black
house.
house
Yeah,
either.
yes. I doubt that's the term.
From what I've
they've
learned
used.
with about these people. Okay. So that neighbor verifies there is no way. This person lives like across the street. No way the Alberts slept through the commotion because they were farther from the commotion.
And they didn't sleep through
They
it.
didn't sleep through it. They came out of their house.
Yeah.
All right. So that was interesting.
But I'm guessing that this Asian family, that they weren't drunk off their minds.
No, I don't think anybody's as drunk off their minds.
As the Alberts have
Do you know
said.
that Paul O'Keefe, John's brother, was also involved in a serious hit and run where somebody was gravely injured?
Paul O'Keefe. Oh, you're right. This is okay. Who's also filing the civil suit against Karen.
There are 3 people in this case. It's Albert, Paul O'Keefe, and Aidan Carney had a blog this week that the clerk magistrate of the court also involved in a very serious hit and run where somebody was gravely injured.
Man.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
It's a common thread.
Yes.
It's a common thread.
Just some stats in the article that stuck out to me. The prosecution had 68 witnesses in the trial. The defense had 6. All right. Karen and Yannetti say that Proctor perjured himself by saying he stopped looking at Karen's phone when he saw communication with her lawyer. Remember that moment?
Yes.
I was searching him. Guess what?
What?
Karen had never communicated with her lawyer by the time that they gave up that phone to the police.
Oh, okay.
So he lied.
Oh, yes, he lied. Yeah.
He probably didn't stop looking at her phone.
Mm-hmm.
And if he did stop, it wasn't because she was communicating with her lawyer, because she was not communicating with Yannetti before she handed over that phone. And remember, that phone is now like separate. They separate it from the other phone. Like, it's not like she can connect to it on other digital devices and he can then see ongoing emails. That phone is now like locked off and they get the Cellbrite data from that phone. So he lied.
Right.
And they're able to prove that he lied.
Right.
And that's on the stand.
Okay.
Okay. So interesting story in the article. You know how Michael Morrissey, the DA of Norfolk County, has hired an outside lawyer to be the prosecutor in the next trial.
Right.
Why did you think that was?
Well, because we thought that maybe he wanted to get somebody who probably is arguably better at this than the people he has on staff, or because they did, a mediocre job the first time, so they wanted to bring in
or maybe
somebody
they
better.
wanted to bulletproof himself against allegations of whatever.
Yeah, right. To bring in, right. Yeah, exactly.
Guess why they actually hired this independent prosecutor?
Why?
Because no other prosecutors in Morrissey's office want to try the case. They all refuse to do it.
Now, that information comes from whom?
That's in the Vanity Fair story. I'm assuming it's from a source in the DA's office.
Okay.
Condé Nast has a fucking legal vetting process. They have fact-checking process. I know that because like I've been interviewed for articles for Condé Nast publications before, and a fact-checker calls you and goes through every single thing you said to make sure that it's what you said. And legal also vets every story to bulletproof them against libel suits. Right. So you have to assume that everything in this story that comes from someone other than Karen Read has been vetted. Has been fact-checked and has gone through legal. So if this Vanity Fair reporter says all the other prosecutors in Morrissey's office refused to try the case, I have no reason to believe that that's not true.
Yeah. I'm always still a little more skeptical of that. That could be true, but I wouldn't just bet the farm on it.
Okay,
you know?
But it is an interesting detail.
It is an interesting detail. Certainly, if it's true, it's very interesting. And that's sort of the thing that I've been saying during the trials. Like, I cannot believe that there isn't somebody, one prosecutor in that office that's looking at it saying, no, why are we tripling down on this? This seems really suspicious.
I believe there are.
Yeah.
So read
just one thing. I forgot just about the dog.
Yeah.
One quick thing about that is that I told you, several months ago, I bumped into a state police detective, another part of the state, no connection to the Karen Read case at all. And we were talking about the dog bites, and he said, well, he has seen dog bites. He said the dog, I've always seen the dog, when it grabs onto the arm, it stays there. It doesn't bite.
Not true.
But he's talking about a police-trained dog.
Correct.
That is what the dog is trained to do, to go and hold on. So a police dog that he's seen would not like bite. But I'm just saying that real-life information, that experience could color the way a police investigator looks at those wounds. Couldn't be dog bites because a dog bite would be just one thing.
Right.
Just one clamping on and not letting go, as opposed to a dog with a documented history of bite, trying to kill somebody.
Every expert on dog bites, first of all, the defense called an expert on dog bites.
Yeah, right.
She was sure it was dog bites.
Yep.
Every other expert on dog bites has looked at those photos, are sure that they're dog bites and scratches.
Yeah, sure.
I am sure they're dog bites and scratches.
Oh, yeah.
I have been bitten by a dog.
Right.
And that's what it fucking looks like.
Right. And I'm not saying that, it was all, multiple bites proves it's not a dog. I'm just saying that professionally trained, and that's why I asked you, was Chloe a police dog? Because you had, it was owned by a police officer.
I don't believe so, because there's photos of Chloe as a young dog with the kids, so I think they've had this dog since it was a puppy.
Yeah, the dog wouldn't.
They had her for 9 years before we.
A trained police dog would not act the way. Okay, I'm sorry, that was just in my head, and I wanted to bring that up. You keep continue with this great information. Karen Read owes $5 million in deferred legal fees. Oh, wow.
One of the reasons why she owes all that money was that she spent more than $500,000 housing herself and her whole legal team during the whole trial. She also hired private Uber drivers to bring them back and forth from the hotel.
Yeah.
And when people complain about Karen Read being seen out at expensive restaurants with her lawyers, A, she says sometimes other people pick up the bill. B, quote, you can't feed Alan Jackson McDonald's. Very funny answer.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so this is the final thing I wanted to tell you. This has to do with the discrepancy between when Proctor says he picked up Karen Read's car at her parents' house in Dighton and when he actually picked it up, because he did lie about that. All right. His affidavit says he picked it up at 5:30. The Read security camera shows that he took the car at 4:12. And later he had to concede to that, even though he lied in his affidavit. So
you mean he was mistaken?
No. The Commonwealth conceded that her car was taken at that time a year and a half later.
Yeah.
Okay. This is why Read thinks the discrepancy took place. All right. Proctor greenlit a CERT team, State Emergency Response Team, after 5:30 in the dark. That is when the pieces of glass were found on the lawn. Karen Read's theory, and I'm sure this is a defense theory as well, and it's a good one, is that the reason they switched the time of the car being picked up was to show that the car was not in their custody before they found the glass.
Okay.
But the bottom line is he had the car for an hour and 15 minutes before the CERT team was called to go to the house. All right. So in the dark, pieces of taillight were found in the Albert yard a week later after multiple searches by law enforcement. Former Canton Police Chief Kevin Berkowitz reported spotting more taillight pieces in the yard from his moving vehicle during a random drive-by. All right. Reed says that she always considered the taillight to be the, quote, cornerstone of the case. It's the only concrete evidence that connects me to the crime scene. And no evidence of that was found until they had it. Mm-hmm. Meaning they had her car.
Right, till they had it.
So those are the things that I wanted to run through with you. I learned a lot of interesting details. I was reminded a lot of interesting details, but of course there were some revelations. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, a good piece of journalism. One of the reasons why it is so, we'll just call it pro Karen Read, or at least leans heavily on her.
From her perspective, yeah.
From her perspective is because none of the other parties agreed to be interviewed.
None.
Whether it's the Mick Alberts, whether it's the state police, whether it's the district attorney's office. So if you're going to write it, you have only really one thing. So, I always say you can't control what the media writes or publishes, but you can control your message. And so if you decide you're not going to participate, you've abdicated your ability to control the message, or at least to get your message out. And so that's what they chose. And so this is why you get a big 2-part article in one of the largest magazines in the world.
But they didn't just take Karen Read's word for all these details. They reported them out.
Right. Yes, right? Yes.
And the other thing that's interesting to me, and the one final thing I want to say, is she does address criticism of her affect in court, of her affect outside of court. People have called her, quote, the happiest murder defendant ever, and shown that as proof of her guilt. Commentators on, Law and Crime and Court TV, who are, by the way, they don't know any of these details and they just spout shit. They really criticize her affect and say that's somehow proof of guilt. So she addressed that, what do you say in response to you're the happiest murder defendant in the world? And she says, if you're fighting for your life, I'm paraphrasing, if you're fighting for your life, and you're not guilty and you've been prosecuted for a crime that you did not commit, and you walk out of the courthouse and see 200 people wearing your favorite color in support of you, of course you're going to smile. Of course you're going to be the happiest murder defendant ever.
Yeah.
I mean, her answers in this story they seemed credible, and they didn't seem annoying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right.
Her problem is she doesn't have a poker face. And you just have to admit that, that sometimes works against her if you're looking at demeanor evidence.
But you know who doesn't also have a poker face? Brian fucking Albert does not have a poker face.
Right.
He glowers in court at her. He glowered at the jury.
Yeah.
By the way, they spoke to a juror for this story.
Uh-huh.
The juror said they thought Jen McCabe was a liar.
Uh-huh.
And was like, lady, would you just fucking stop lying? And the juror was very intimidated by the McCabe and Albert presence in courtroom.
During closing arguments.
That's what I learned, and that's what's going on. And this has been a very meaty readathon, Kevin.
It has. Boy, we got everybody. This is your weekend listen, right? Okay.
Thank you so much for coming out here to talk to me about my favorite topic in the world.
You got it.
All right, talk soon.
Partners in Crime Media.